Close your eyes and imagine you're lying on a quiet beach. The sun has set, leaving behind a soft twilight that paints the sky in shades of deep purple and midnight blue. The sand beneath you is still warm from the day, gently supporting your body as you sink into complete relaxation. Before you stretches the endless ocean, its surface catching the last light of evening, turning the waves into liquid silver. Listen to the rhythm of the water. The waves roll in with a gentle whoosh, carrying with them the ancient stories of the sea. They retreat with a soft sigh, taking with them any tension, any worry, any thought that has been weighing on your mind. This is the ocean's lullaby, a sound that has soothed countless souls across countless ages, a rhythm as old as the earth itself. Tonight, we're going to explore the ocean together, but not in the way you might expect. We won't be diving into adventure or excitement. Instead, we'll be drifting through the most peaceful, calming aspects of the marine world. We'll discover the slow, steady rhythms that govern the seas, the ancient processes that unfold over millennia, the gentle creatures that glide through the water, and the profound stillness that exists in the deep. Each fact, each story, each detail is chosen to help your mind settle, your breathing slow, and your body release into the deepest, most restorative sleep. So let yourself relax completely. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Just drift with me now, as we begin our journey into the most tranquil realm on Earth. The physics of peace, understanding wave motion. If you've ever watched waves rolling onto a shore, you've witnessed one of nature's most hypnotic displays. But what you might not realize is that waves are not actually moving water from one place to another. Instead, they're moving energy through the water. Think of it like this. When you watch a wave travel across the ocean's surface, the water molecules aren't traveling with it. They're simply moving in small circular motions, rising up as the wave approaches, then falling back down as it passes, returning almost exactly to where they started. This circular motion is profoundly soothing when you truly understand it. Each molecule of water traces an invisible orbit, like a gentle wheel turning in place. The wave itself is pure energy, rippling outward from wherever it began, perhaps from a storm thousands of miles away, or from the wind's gentle breath across the surface. As this energy passes through, the water simply rises and falls in an endless, peaceful rhythm. Scientists describe this with elegant mathematics, explaining how waves travel in complex patterns that depend on wavelength, water depth, and wind speed. But you don't need to understand the equations to appreciate the beauty of it. What matters is the constancy, the reliability, the way the ocean breathes in its own time, completely unconcerned with the hurried pace of human life. In the open ocean, waves can travel for thousands of miles without breaking. Long, slow swells generated by distant weather systems roll across entire ocean basins, their energy barely diminishing over vast distances. These swells have a particularly calming frequency, often traveling at speeds that create a rhythm slower than human breathing. When these waves finally reach shallow water near a coastline, they slow down, their lower portions dragging against the seafloor while their crests continue forward, eventually causing them to curl and break in that familiar cascade of white foam. But even in breaking, there's order. The wave doesn't simply collapse randomly. It follows the same physics each time, the same graceful arc, the same transformation from organized energy to scattered droplets and foam. And within moments, the water settles again, ready to lift the next wave, to continue the eternal pattern. The energy in waves comes primarily from wind, which transfers its kinetic energy to the water's surface through friction and pressure differences. When wind blows across smooth water, it creates tiny ripples. These ripples give the wind more surface area to push against, and they grow into small waves. Given enough time, enough wind, and enough distance over water, these small waves merge and organize into the large swells that can cross entire oceans. What's remarkable is that waves can travel far beyond where the wind created them. These are called swells, and they're particularly peaceful because they've left behind the chaos of their birth. The choppy, irregular waves near a storm eventually sort themselves out. Longer wavelengths travel faster, pulling ahead, while shorter wavelengths lag behind. Over hundreds or thousands of miles, the ocean naturally filters and organizes wave energy into smooth, rhythmic swells. By the time waves generated by a storm near Antarctica reach California, they've spent weeks traveling, their energy spread out and smoothed into long, gentle undulations. The tidal dance, moon and ocean as partners. Now let's think about tides, those slow rises and falls of the entire ocean that occur twice each day. The tide doesn't rush in or suddenly retreat. It creeps up the beach over the course of hours, grain by grain, claiming a little more sand, advancing almost imperceptibly. Then, just as gradually, it withdraws, revealing shells and stones that were hidden beneath the water, exposing tide pools teeming with quiet life. The cause of tides is celestial, a connection between ocean and sky that spans hundreds of thousands of miles. The moon, though it never touches the water, exerts a gravitational pull on Earth's oceans. Because the ocean is fluid, it responds by bulging slightly toward the moon. At the same time, the water on the opposite side of Earth bulges away from the moon due to inertial forces. These two bulges create the high tides, while the areas perpendicular to them experience low tides. As Earth rotates beneath these bulges, any given point on the coast passes through both high and low tides approximately twice every 24 hours and 50 minutes. The extra 50 minutes occurs because the moon itself is orbiting Earth, moving slightly ahead each day, requiring Earth to rotate a bit more to catch up. The sun also influences tides, though less strongly than the moon. When the sun, moon, and Earth align during full and new moons, their gravitational forces combine to create particularly high and low tides called spring tides. When the sun and moon are perpendicular to each other from Earth's perspective, during the first and third quarter moons, their forces partially cancel each other out, creating more moderate neap tides. But let's focus not on the mechanisms, but on the feeling of tides. Stand on a beach at low tide, and you're standing on ground that will be underwater in just a few hours. The certainty of it is calming. The tide will return, as it always has, as it always will. Nothing you do, no worry you carry, no problem you face will stop the tide from coming in. It operates on its own schedule, following rules written in gravity and motion, rules older than mountains. There's something deeply peaceful about processes that continue regardless of human concerns. The tide doesn't hurry. It doesn't forget. It simply flows according to the timeless dance between Earth and moon, a rhythm that has continued for billions of years and will continue for billions more. Some coastlines experience one high tide per day, others two. Some places have dramatic tidal ranges of 15 meters or more, while others barely notice any difference. Each coast has its own tidal personality, its own timing, its own rhythm, but all of them share this fundamental quality. They are dependable, predictable, eternal. Ocean currents, the slow rivers within the sea. Beneath the surface, beyond the realm of waves and tides, flows another movement entirely. Ocean currents are like rivers within the sea, vast streams of water that flow through the ocean basins, moving heat, nutrients, and life across the planet. These currents move slowly by human standards, perhaps a few miles per day, but they are relentless and powerful, carrying volumes of water that dwarf any river on land. The Gulf Stream, for instance, carries warm water from the tropical Atlantic northward along the eastern coast of North America and then across to Europe. This current is nearly 100 kilometers wide and flows at speeds of several kilometers per hour. The water temperature within the Gulf Stream can be 10 degrees warmer than the surrounding ocean, and it transports roughly 50 million cubic meters of water every second. This steady flow of warmth moderates the climate of Western Europe, making places like Ireland and England far milder than other locations at the same latitude. Picture this current as a vast, silent river flowing through the sea. It doesn't announce itself with rapids or waterfalls. It simply flows day after day, year after year, century after century. The water molecules moving within it might take years to complete the journey from the Caribbean to the North Atlantic, traveling in a gentle, persistent stream. These surface currents are driven primarily by wind patterns, which are themselves driven by the uneven heating of Earth's surface by the sun. But there are also deep currents, part of what scientists call the thermohaline circulation or global conveyor belt. These deep currents are driven not by wind, but by differences in water density caused by temperature and salinity variations. In the polar regions, cold air chills the surface water. When seawater freezes into sea ice, it leaves most of its salt behind in the liquid water, making that water saltier and therefore denser. This cold, salty water sinks, flowing along the ocean floor toward the equator, while warmer water flows along the surface to replace it. This creates a vast, three-dimensional circulation pattern that moves water throughout all the world's ocean basins. The complete circuit of this global conveyor belt takes roughly 1,000 years. Water that sinks in the North Atlantic might not return to the surface until it reaches the North Pacific, after traveling along the ocean floor through the Atlantic, around Africa, across the Indian Ocean, and through the Pacific. It's a journey measured not in days or months, but in centuries. This slow churning serves essential purposes. It distributes heat around the planet, preventing the tropics from becoming intolerably hot and the poles from becoming even colder. It carries oxygen to the deep ocean, supporting life in the darkest depths. It moves nutrients from where they're plentiful to where they're needed. But for our purposes, what matters most is the pace of it all. The unhurried, unstoppable flow of water following pathways established over millions of years. There's no rush in the deep ocean. Currents don't speed up when they need to arrive somewhere. They simply flow at their own pace, governed by density and rotation and the shape of the ocean floor. This is time measured in geological scales, movement that acknowledges no urgency because there is none. The ocean has all the time in the world, the symphony of water in motion. When you put all these movements together, waves transferring energy across the surface, tides rising and falling with lunar gravity, currents flowing through 3 dimensions, you get a picture of an ocean in constant, gentle motion. Nothing in the sea is truly still. Even in the calmest conditions, water molecules are moving, responding to forces both local and distant, near and cosmic. Yet despite all this motion, there's no frenzy. The ocean doesn't panic. It responds to forces with patient fluidity, always finding its level, always seeking equilibrium. When wind pushes it one direction, it flows that way. When gravity pulls it down, it settles. When heat enters it, the water expands and rises. When cold extracts energy, it contracts and sinks. Every action has a calm, measured response. This is perhaps why the ocean is so soothing to witness and to contemplate. It embodies a kind of acceptance, a willingness to respond to conditions without resistance yet without urgency. The water simply is, moving as it must, shaped by forces beyond its control yet never struggling against them. As you lie on this beach in your imagination, feel the rhythm of the waves. Let your breathing slow to match their pace. Imagine the tide gradually advancing up the sand, each wave reaching a tiny bit further than the last, in no hurry at all. Picture the vast currents flowing beneath the surface, carrying warmth and life on journeys that span oceans and centuries. And let yourself merge with these rhythms. Let your thoughts slow to match the pace of the tides. Let any tension in your body dissolve like foam on the beach, carried away by the retreating waves. Part 2. The deep blue exploring ocean zones. The sunlight zone, where light dances on water. Let's begin our descent by thinking about the uppermost layer of the ocean, the sunlight zone or epipelagic zone, which extends from the surface down to about 200 meters. This is the realm most familiar to us, the layer we see when we look at the ocean, the domain of swimmers and surface-dwelling creatures, the place where sunlight penetrates fully and photosynthesis can occur. In this zone, light is abundant but constantly changing. As the sun moves across the sky, its rays strike the water at different angles, creating patterns of brightness and shadow that shift throughout the day. When the sun is directly overhead at noon, light penetrates deepest and most intensely. At dawn and dusk, the light comes in at steep angles, creating long beams that spread across the surface but don't penetrate as deeply. Beneath the surface, the light transforms. Red wavelengths are absorbed first, within just a few meters of the surface. This is why everything appears blue-green underwater. Those are the wavelengths that penetrate deepest. Orange disappears next, then yellow, until only blue and violet light remain at the lower limits of the sunlight zone. This zone is where most of the ocean's microscopic plants live, specifically phytoplankton, tiny drifting organisms that photosynthesize like plants on land. These organisms are so small that billions of them can exist in a single cubic meter of water. Yet despite their size, they produce approximately 50% of all the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. Every other breath you take comes from these microscopic ocean drifters, these nearly invisible organisms floating in the sunlit waters. The sunlight zone is also home to the greatest diversity of marine life. Fish of every description swim through these waters. From tiny anchovies to massive whale sharks, from fast-swimming tuna to gracefully drifting sunfish. Sea turtles cruise through, surfacing regularly to breathe. Dolphins and porpoises arc through the waves. Seabirds dive from above, plunging through the surface to snatch fish from the blue. Despite all this life and activity, there's still a peaceful quality to the sunlight zone, especially if you imagine floating just beneath the surface on a calm day. Above you, the sun creates a shimmering ceiling of light and ripples. Below you, the blue gradually deepens, fading toward darkness. All around you, the gentle pressure of the water supports your body, relieving your joints and muscles of the need to work against gravity. You're suspended, weightless, cradled in liquid warmth. The temperature in the sunlight zone varies greatly depending on location and season, from tropical waters that hover near 30 degrees Celsius year-round to polar waters that remain near freezing. In temperate zones, the sunlight zone exhibits dramatic seasonal temperature changes, warming in summer and cooling in winter, creating a rhythm that marine life has adapted to over millions of years. At the bottom of the sunlight zone, around 200 meters deep, you'd notice the light becoming increasingly dim, the colors fading to monochromatic blue. This is the beginning of a transition, a threshold beyond which photosynthesis can no longer occur effectively. You're approaching the twilight zone. The twilight zone, realm of fading light. Between 200 and 1,000 meters below the surface lies the mesopelagic zone, more evocatively called the twilight zone. This is a realm of perpetual dimness, where sunlight still penetrates but so weakly that it creates a permanent dusk. Your eyes, if they could adapt, would see only the faintest blue glow above, fading gradually into blackness below. In this zone, the light is too dim for photosynthesis, yet it's still enough for vision. Many creatures living here have large eyes to gather as much light as possible, while others have evolved to see wavelengths that penetrate particularly well into these depths. The environment exists in a delicate balance between light and dark, between the surface world and the deep abyss. The temperature drops notably in the twilight zone. Near the top, around 200 meters, the water might still retain some warmth from the surface, perhaps 15 degrees Celsius. But as you descend, the temperature plummets. By 1,000 meters, in most parts of the ocean, the water has cooled to around 4 degrees Celsius, approaching the temperature that will remain nearly constant through all the deeper zones. This temperature gradient creates what's called the thermocline, a layer where temperature changes rapidly with depth. The thermocline acts as a barrier of sorts, separating the warm, mixed surface waters from the cold, stable deep waters. It's a transition zone, a threshold, a place where two worlds meet but don't quite mix. Life in the twilight zone has adapted to these conditions in fascinating and peaceful ways. Many animals are bioluminescent, producing their own light through chemical reactions in their bodies. But this light isn't garish or bright. It's typically a soft blue-green glow, just enough to startle a predator, attract a mate, or lure prey. The twilight zone twinkles with these gentle lights, like stars underwater, each one a living creature navigating the dim world. Many twilight zone creatures are small and translucent, their bodies nearly invisible in the low light. Others are silvery, reflecting what little light there is, effectively becoming mirrors in the water. Still others are dark red or black, colors that appear black in the blue light of these depths, rendering them invisible to most eyes. One of the most remarkable features of the twilight zone is the daily vertical migration that occurs here. As evening falls and the surface waters darken, countless creatures from the twilight zone swim upward to feed in the plankton-rich surface waters. Then, before dawn, they descend again, returning to the safety of the twilight zone's dimness. This is the largest migration of animals on Earth in terms of biomass, yet it happens out of sight, beneath the waves, following a rhythm as old as predation itself. The silence in the twilight zone is nearly complete. Sound travels well in water, but the creatures here are largely quiet. There are no bird calls, no wind sounds, no rustling vegetation. Just the occasional click of a hunting cetacean, the subtle vibrations of a swimming fish, the nearly imperceptible movement of water responding to temperature and current. Imagine yourself suspended in this zone, floating in the eternal twilight. Above you, the memory of sunlight fades to the faintest glow. Below you, absolute darkness beckons. The water is cold but not unbearably so, and the pressure, while significant, is merely a gentle squeeze, barely noticeable. You're in a place between worlds, neither in the bright realm of the surface nor in the absolute dark of the deep. You're in transition, in passage, suspended in twilight. The midnight zone, where darkness becomes complete. Descend further, past 1,000 meters, and you enter the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone, where sunlight cannot penetrate at all. This is a world of absolute, utter darkness, broken only by the occasional bioluminescent flash of a creature passing by. Your eyes would be useless here in the darkness, unless you were to produce light yourself. The midnight zone extends from 1,000 meters down to 4,000 meters, encompassing a vast vertical expanse of water. In this realm, the temperature hovers constantly around 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, barely above freezing. The pressure is immense. At 2,000 meters, the pressure is roughly 200 times greater than at the surface. At 4,000 meters, it's 400 times greater. Yet this is not a dead zone. Life persists here, adapted to conditions that would crush and freeze most surface-dwelling organisms. The creatures of the midnight zone have evolved remarkable solutions to their challenges. They're often small, conserving energy in an environment where food is scarce. They're frequently black or dark red, invisible in the darkness. Many have large mouths relative to their body size, allowing them to consume prey larger than themselves when the rare opportunity presents itself. Bioluminescence is even more important here than in the twilight zone. In total darkness, the ability to produce light becomes a crucial survival tool. Some fish have bioluminescent lures dangling in front of their mouths, like the famous anglerfish with its glowing appendage. Others have light organs on their bellies, used for counterillumination. They adjust the brightness of these organs to match any faint light from above, eliminating their silhouette and making them invisible to predators looking up from below. The food web in the midnight zone depends largely on marine snow, the constant gentle rain of organic particles falling from the sunlit surface far above. Dead phytoplankton, fecal matter from surface animals, discarded mucus nets from filter feeders, fragments of larger dead organisms. All of this material drifts slowly downward, taking weeks or months to reach these depths, where it sustains a community of creatures that will never see the sun. There's something profoundly peaceful about the midnight zone once you accept its conditions. The darkness is complete and non-threatening. There are no predators lurking that you can't sense. The cold is stable, unchanging. The pressure, while extreme, is simply a fact of existence, no more alarming to a midnight zone creature than atmospheric pressure is to you. Everything here has adapted, found its niche, discovered ways to thrive in conditions that seem impossible. Time moves differently in the midnight zone, with no day-night cycle, no seasons perceptible through temperature or light changes. The passage of time is marked only by internal biological clocks and the arrival of food from above. Metabolisms are slow. Movement is minimal. Creatures drift in the darkness, waiting patiently for prey or for particles of food to descend from the world above. If you could exist comfortably at these depths, you'd find yourself in the most peaceful place imaginable. No light means no distractions for the eyes. No sound means no disturbances for the ears. The pressure would become normal, unnoticeable. The cold would simply be the temperature of everything around you. You would float in darkness so complete that the concept of sight would become meaningless. You would simply exist, suspended in the vast body of the ocean, held in equilibrium between the weight of water above and the resistance of water below, perfectly balanced in three-dimensional space. The abyssal plain, the ocean floor. Below the midnight zone, from 4,000 to 6,000 meters, spreads the abyssopelagic zone, and beneath it lies the ocean floor, the abyssal plain. These plains cover more of Earth's surface than any other habitat. They're vast, flat expanses of sediment, the accumulated remains of billions of years of marine snow, compressed into layers sometimes kilometers thick. The conditions here are remarkably stable. The temperature varies by only a degree or two across the entire abyssal plain, hovering just above freezing. The pressure exceeds 400 atmospheres. Darkness is absolute and unchanging. There are no currents to speak of, just the slow, almost imperceptible movement of water responding to temperature gradients and the rotation of the Earth. Life on the abyssal plain is sparse but persistent. Sea cucumbers inch across the sediment, consuming organic matter. Strange fish hover just above the bottom, conserving energy with minimal movement. Amphipods, relatives of sand fleas, scuttle through the ooze. Bacteria break down organic compounds in the sediment, releasing nutrients that will eventually find their way back up through the food chain via deep currents. The sediment itself is a record of time. Each layer represents years or decades of deposition, the steady accumulation of material from above. Core samples taken from the deep ocean floor reveal layers going back millions of years, capturing information about past climates, ocean conditions, and life forms. This sediment is the ocean's memory, preserving in mud and ooze the slow passage of ages. Standing on the abyssal plain, if you somehow could, you'd be on some of the most ancient, undisturbed surface on Earth. Unlike continents, which are constantly being reshaped by erosion, mountain building, and glaciation, the abyssal plains change almost imperceptibly slowly. A footprint on the abyssal plain might remain visible for decades, slowly filling in with sediment over years or centuries. This is the ultimate realm of stillness, the place where all motion slows to nearly nothing, where time passes in geological scales, where change is measured in millennia. It's peaceful not because it's pretty or because it's teeming with life, but because it simply is utterly stable, completely unchanged by the frenetic activity of the surface world thousands of meters above. The Hadal Zone, Earth's deepest places. Finally, there are the ocean trenches, the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the Greek underworld. These are the deepest places in the ocean, plunging down to nearly 11,000 meters below the surface. The Mariana Trench, the deepest known point, reaches a depth of approximately 10,900 meters at a spot called Challenger Deep. The pressure at these depths exceeds 1,000 atmospheres, equivalent to having the weight of a large truck pressing on every square inch of your body. The temperature remains just above freezing. The darkness is absolute, and yet, even here, life exists. Creatures living in the Hadal Zone have evolved remarkable pressure-tolerant biochemistry. Their cell membranes contain special lipids that remain flexible under extreme pressure. Their proteins fold in ways that function properly when compressed. They have no gas-filled spaces in their bodies that would be crushed by the pressure. The Hadal Zone is the ultimate frontier of life on Earth, the place that pushes the boundaries of what we thought possible. It reminds us that life is tenacious, adaptable, and persistent. Even in the most extreme conditions imaginable, organisms find ways to survive and even thrive. But for our purposes, the Hadal Zone represents something more. The absolute end of the descent, the bottom of the ocean, the place where you can go no deeper. It's a destination, a final point, a place where descent ends and only rest remains. In the trenches, there's nowhere left to fall. You've reached the deepest possible place, and now you can simply be held by the water, supported by the earth itself, resting at the very bottom of the world. Part 3. Bioluminescence. Nature's underwater light show. The chemistry of living light. In the darkness of the deep ocean, light takes on a special quality. It's not the constant, bright illumination of the sun, but rather brief, gentle flashes and glows produced by living organisms themselves. This phenomenon, called bioluminescence, is the production and emission of light by a living creature through a chemical reaction. The basic chemistry of bioluminescence is elegant in its simplicity. A molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. This reaction produces light with very little heat. Unlike a light bulb, which converts most of its energy to heat, bioluminescence is approximately 80 to 90% efficient, turning almost all the reaction's energy directly into light. Different organisms use different types of luciferin and luciferase, which suggests that bioluminescence has evolved independently many times throughout the history of life. The specifics of the chemistry vary, but the result is always the same. A soft glow or flash of light in colors ranging from blue to green to yellow, and occasionally even red. Most bioluminescence in the ocean produces blue or blue-green light. This is because these wavelengths travel farthest through seawater. Longer wavelengths like red and orange are absorbed quickly by water molecules, but shorter wavelengths can travel significant distances. For organisms trying to communicate or hunt in dark water, blue light is simply the most practical choice. The light itself is cold. There's no warmth emanating from a bioluminescent creature. If you could hold a glowing jellyfish in your hand, you'd feel no heat from its light. This makes bioluminescence remarkably gentle and safe. It's light without fire, illumination without burning, a glow that exists purely for signaling or defense or attraction, never for warmth. Creatures that glow in the darkness. Bioluminescence is found throughout the ocean, from surface waters to the deepest trenches, but it's most common in the twilight and midnight zones where darkness prevails. Scientists estimate that perhaps 90% of creatures living in these zones can produce light in some way. Some of the most elegant bioluminescent organisms are the dinoflagellates, microscopic single-celled organisms that float in the surface waters. When disturbed by a wave or a swimming animal, they flash briefly, creating a sparkle in the water. On particularly calm nights with the right conditions, breaking waves on a beach can glow blue-green as billions of dinoflagellates emit their brief flashes. This same phenomenon creates the bioluminescent bays famous in Puerto Rico and other tropical locations, where every movement in the water triggers cascades of gentle blue light. Jellyfish use bioluminescence in various ways. Some species glow continuously, their bells pulsing with soft light as they drift through the water. Others flash when threatened, the sudden bright light potentially startling a predator. The crystal jelly, Equoria victoria, produces green fluorescent protein, the famous GFP that has become an invaluable tool in scientific research. When this jellyfish is disturbed, it glows with a gentle green light around the edges of its bell. In the deep sea, many fish have evolved bioluminescent organs called photophores. These are specialized structures that can produce light, often located in patterns along the fish's body. Some fish have just a few photophores, while others have dozens or even hundreds, creating patterns unique to their species. These patterns might serve as identification, allowing fish to recognize members of their own species in the darkness, or as signals for mating. The anglerfish is perhaps the most famous bioluminescent fish, with its modified dorsal spine that extends forward over its mouth like a fishing rod, tipped with a glowing lure. The light comes from bioluminescent bacteria living in the lure in a symbiotic relationship. The anglerfish provides the bacteria with nutrients and a home, and in return, the bacteria provide the light that helps the anglerfish hunt. Small fish and other prey are attracted to the glowing lure, swimming closer to investigate, unaware that they're approaching the huge mouth of a waiting predator. But even predation in the deep sea has a gentle quality to it. Encounters between predator and prey are infrequent. Food is scarce, so energy must be conserved. A predator might wait for hours or days for prey to approach its lure. When prey finally arrives, the interaction is quick and quiet, a brief flash of bioluminescence, a snap of jaws, then stillness returns. Some creatures use bioluminescence for counterillumination, a form of camouflage. Hatchetfish, for instance, have light organs on their bellies that they can adjust to match the faint light filtering down from above. Predators looking up from below see not the dark silhouette of a fish, but a belly that blends perfectly with the dim light of the water column. It's an elegant solution to the problem of being visible against the lighter waters above. Squid use bioluminescence in sophisticated ways. Some species have patterns of photophores that they can control independently, creating flashing displays that might serve to communicate with other squid or to confuse predators. The vampire squid, despite its ominous name, is actually a peaceful creature that feeds on marine snow. When threatened, it turns itself inside out, displaying bioluminescent organs that produce a spectacular but harmless light show intended to startle and confuse attackers. The peaceful purpose of bioluminescence. What's striking about bioluminescence, beyond its beauty, is its subtlety. These are not harsh, bright lights. They're gentle glows and brief flashes, just enough light to serve their purpose without being overwhelming. In the vast darkness of the deep ocean, a little light goes a long way. A flash that would be barely noticeable in daylight becomes significant in total darkness. This reflects a fundamental truth about the deep ocean. Everything is precisely calibrated to the environment. There's no excess, no waste. Bioluminescence uses just enough energy to produce just enough light for just long enough to serve its purpose. Then darkness returns. The bioluminescent creatures of the ocean are like stars in a liquid sky, scattered points of light in the vastness, each one a tiny beacon marking the presence of life in the depths. And like stars, they're separated by great distances, each one essentially alone in the darkness, occasionally glimpsing the light of another of its kind, but mostly existing in solitary peace. Imagine floating in the midnight zone, surrounded by darkness so complete that you can't see your own hand in front of your face. Then, in the distance, a brief flash, green, blue, gone in an instant. Then silence and darkness again. Minutes pass. Another flash, this time closer, longer. A jellyfish drifts by, its bell pulsing with soft blue light, fading to dimness, pulsing again, passes and darkness returns. You wait, suspended in the water, and the stillness is profound, broken only by these occasional gentle lights. This is bioluminescence. Not a flood of illumination, but punctuation marks in the darkness. Gentle reminders that even in the deepest, darkest places, life persists, creating beauty for its own purposes, turning chemistry into light, into meaning, into survival. Part 4. Marine Life's Soothing Behaviors. Whale songs. The ocean's deep melodies. Of all the sounds in the ocean, few are as haunting and peaceful as whale songs. These vocalizations, produced primarily by male humpback whales during breeding season, are among the most complex acoustic displays in the animal kingdom, structured in patterns that bear striking similarities to human music. A whale song consists of several layers of organization. The smallest unit is a single sound, which might be a moan, a cry, a chirp, or a rumble. These units are combined into phrases, which are then arranged into themes. A complete song might last 20 to 30 minutes and include multiple themes arranged in a specific order. The whale then repeats this song, sometimes for hours, creating a performance that can continue for an entire day or longer. The frequencies of whale songs are low, typically between 20 and 200 hertz, well within the range of human hearing. In fact, the songs are so low-pitched that they can travel for enormous distances through the ocean. Under the right conditions, a whale song might be detectable 100 miles away, and some scientists have suggested that certain calls might travel even farther, potentially crossing entire ocean basins. The sound itself is peaceful, a deep, reverberating quality that seems to come from everywhere at once in the water. If you were swimming in the ocean during whale song season, you might feel the vibrations in your chest and bones as much as hear them with your ears. The low notes resonate through the water, through your body, connecting you physically to the singing whale, even if it's miles away. What's remarkable about whale songs is that they change over time. All the humpback whales in a particular population sing essentially the same song in a given year, but this song evolves gradually from season to season. New phrases are introduced, old ones are modified or dropped, and the overall structure shifts. It's as if the whales collectively compose a symphony, with each individual contributing to its performance and its evolution. The purpose of whale songs isn't entirely understood, though they're clearly connected to breeding and likely serve to attract females or establish dominance among males. But setting aside the evolutionary purpose, we can simply appreciate the songs as what they are: beautiful, complex acoustic performances that fill the ocean with sound, transforming vast expanses of water into concert halls. Scientists have studied these songs extensively, creating spectrograms that show the frequency and duration of each sound. These visual representations reveal intricate patterns, repeating motifs, variations on themes. If you were to see a spectrogram of a whale song, you might think you were looking at a musical score, such as the level of structure and organization. But more than the complexity, what makes whale songs so soothing is their rhythm and tone. The sounds rise and fall in gentle waves, not unlike the ocean itself. There's a mournful quality to many of the sounds, a sense of vastness and solitude that perfectly captures the experience of being a whale in the enormous ocean. Yet there's also something hopeful, something reaching out, a desire to connect across the empty miles. Listening to recordings of whale songs, even through speakers far from the ocean, has a profoundly calming effect. The deep tones bypass the thinking mind and speak directly to something more primal, more instinctive. They remind us of depths, of mysteries, of the presence of intelligence and intention in the dark waters. They tell us we're not alone, that consciousness exists in forms vastly different from our own, experiencing the world in ways we can barely imagine. Gentle giants, the peaceful nature of large marine animals. Despite their size, many of the largest creatures in the ocean are remarkably gentle. Whale sharks, for instance, are the largest fish species, reaching lengths of 12 meters or more. Yet they feed exclusively on plankton and small fish. They swim through the water with their huge mouths agape, filtering thousands of gallons per hour, straining out tiny organisms while the water flows back out through their gills. Watching a whale shark swim is meditation in motion. They move slowly, deliberately, their massive bodies undulating in gentle waves. Their skin is covered in a distinctive pattern of spots and stripes, unique to each individual like a fingerprint. They seem utterly unconcerned with anything around them, neither aggressive nor fearful, simply existing in their own peaceful reality, eternal in their patience as they sieve the water for sustenance. Blue whales, the largest animals to have ever existed on Earth, reaching lengths of up to 30 meters and weights of nearly 200 tons, are similarly gentle despite their size. They feed on krill, tiny shrimp-like creatures that swarm in enormous schools in productive waters. A blue whale will surge through a krill swarm with its mouth open, engulfing huge volumes of water and krill, then force the water out through baleen plates that trap the krill inside. The sound of a blue whale's heartbeat, recorded by scientists using sophisticated equipment, is among the slowest of any animal. At rest, a blue whale's heart beats only 2 times per minute, each contraction powerful enough to be felt from meters away in the water. During a dive, the rate drops even further, conserving oxygen for the time spent underwater. This extraordinarily slow heartbeat speaks to the blue whale's overall pace of life. Everything happens slowly, deliberately, without rush. Manta rays are another example of large, gentle creatures. With wingspans that can exceed 7 meters, These graceful fish glide through the water like underwater birds, their pectoral fins flapping in slow, powerful strokes. They feed on plankton, often swimming in lazy circles through productive waters, sometimes performing barrel rolls as they feed, movements that seem more like dance than hunting. Mantas are known for their apparent intelligence and curiosity. They approach divers with what seems like interest, sometimes circling repeatedly as if examining these strange creatures that have entered their world. There's no aggression, no fear, just curiosity. Swimming with a manta ray, watching its huge form glide past, seeing its distinctive head fins funneling water and plankton into its mouth, is an experience of profound peace. The ray is so clearly at ease in its environment, so perfectly adapted to its way of life, that its presence itself becomes calming. Even among predators, there's often a quality of patience and precision rather than frenzy. Sharks, often portrayed as mindless killing machines, are actually sophisticated hunters that conserve energy and typically avoid unnecessary risks. Most sharks spend much of their time swimming slowly, investigating their environment, occasionally hunting but often simply existing, moving through their territories with quiet confidence. The ocean sunfish, or mola mola, is one of the strangest and most peaceful of all large fish. It's essentially a massive, flattened disc with fins, looking like a huge swimming head with no body. Sunfish can weigh over 2,000 kilograms, making them the heaviest bony fish in existence. Despite their size, they move slowly and feed primarily on jellyfish, one of the least nutritious food sources in the ocean. Sunfish are often seen at the surface, lying on their sides as if sunbathing, allowing seabirds to pick parasites off their skin. They appear almost meditative in these moments, floating at the interface between water and air, seemingly content to simply exist, requiring nothing more than what they have. Symbiotic relationships and ocean harmony. Throughout the ocean, countless relationships between different species demonstrate a kind of harmony, a peaceful coexistence based on mutual benefit. These symbiotic relationships, where two species live in close association with each other, reveal that the ocean is not just a battleground of competition, but also a network of cooperation. One of the most famous examples is the relationship between clownfish and sea anemones. The anemone provides the clownfish with protection. Its stinging tentacles ward off predators, but the clownfish is immune to the sting due to a special mucus covering its skin. In return, the clownfish protects the anemone from butterfly fish that would otherwise eat its tentacles, and the clownfish's waste provides nutrients for the anemone. Watch a clownfish swimming among anemone tentacles, and you see trust embodied. The fish darts in and out, entirely at home among what would be deadly to most other creatures. The anemone sways gently in the current, its tentacles forming a protective garden for its small companion. It's a partnership that has evolved over millions of years, each species shaping the other's evolution, becoming increasingly interdependent. Cleaner fish and cleaner shrimp provide another beautiful example of symbiosis. These small creatures establish cleaning stations on coral reefs, where larger fish come to have parasites and dead skin removed. The cleaners get a meal and the larger fish get healthier. What's remarkable is that even predatory fish will visit cleaning stations and allow the tiny cleaners to enter their mouths and gills, places where they could easily be eaten, yet they're never harmed. This requires a degree of restraint and what almost seems like understanding. The large fish waits patiently while the cleaner works, sometimes hovering motionless for several minutes. The cleaner fearlessly goes about its work, trusting that the implicit agreement of the cleaning station will be honored. And almost always it is. These cleaning stations become places of truce, where the normal rules of predator and prey are suspended for mutual benefit. Remeras, or suckerfish, attach themselves to sharks, rays, and whales using a specialized disc on top of their heads. They hitch rides on these larger animals, eating scraps from their meals and keeping their hosts clean of parasites. The host gets cleaning services and the remora gets transportation and food. It's a simple arrangement, but one that works beautifully, allowing the remora to travel vast distances with minimal effort while providing a service to creatures that would otherwise struggle to remove parasites. Even stranger are the relationships some fish have with bioluminescent bacteria. The bacteria live in special organs in the fish's body, receiving nutrients and a protected home while providing light that the fish uses for hunting or signaling. This is an intimate symbiosis with bacteria living inside the fish, the two organisms so interconnected that neither could easily survive without the other. These relationships remind us that survival doesn't always require competition and aggression. Often, the most successful strategy is cooperation, finding ways to benefit from the presence of others rather than fighting against them. The ocean is full of such arrangements, countless examples of species that have found ways to coexist not just peacefully but beneficially, each one enhancing the other's life. Migration patterns as nature's meditation. Many marine animals undertake migrations of extraordinary distance, journeys that can span oceans and take months or even years to complete. These migrations follow routes established over countless generations, pathways through the ocean that are passed down not through teaching, but through genetic memory and celestial navigation. Gray whales migrate approximately 10,000 to 12,000 miles round trip each year, one of the longest migrations of any mammal. They spend summers in the cold, productive waters of the Arctic, feeding on bottom-dwelling crustaceans, building up fat reserves. Then, as winter approaches, they begin a journey south along the coast to the warm lagoons of Baja California, where females give birth and nurse their calves in sheltered waters. This journey takes about 2 to 3 months in each direction. The whales swim continuously, barely stopping to rest, covering roughly 100 miles per day. Yet despite the distance and the effort, there's a sense of purpose and calm to their travel. They're not rushing frantically or struggling against the journey. They're simply doing what gray whales have done for millions of years, following the ancient path, trusting in the rhythm that has sustained their species. Arctic terns hold the record for longest migration of any animal. These small seabirds fly from their Arctic breeding grounds to the Antarctic and back each year, a round trip that can exceed 40,000 miles. They essentially follow an eternal summer, experiencing more daylight in a year than any other creature, witnessing 2 summers for every winter. The energy required for such migrations is enormous, yet the birds complete them year after year throughout their lives, which can span 20 years or more. They don't question the journey or resist it. They simply fly, riding wind patterns, stopping occasionally to feed, then continuing on, driven by ancient instincts toward distant destinations. Sea turtles also undertake remarkable migrations. Female sea turtles, after reaching maturity, will swim thousands of miles across open ocean to return to the beach where they hatched, sometimes decades earlier. How they navigate with such precision is not entirely understood, but they appear to use the Earth's magnetic field as a map, sensing subtle variations in magnetic intensity and inclination that allow them to determine their location. Once at the beach, often the exact beach where they were born, they emerge from the water at night, drag themselves up the sand, dig a nest, lay their eggs, cover them, and return to the sea. Then they swim back across the ocean to their feeding grounds, a journey that might take months. Years later, when breeding season comes again, they repeat the journey, driven by an impulse older than memory. These migrations are not adventures or explorations. They're pilgrimages, repetitions of ancient patterns, movements through space that connect the animal to its past, to its future offspring, to the vast cycles of ocean and season and life. There's a meditative quality to such journeys, a surrender to the pattern, an acceptance of the path that must be followed. How marine animals sleep. Even in the ocean, rest is necessary. But sleep looks different in water than it does on land. Marine mammals, which breathe air and must surface regularly, can't simply lose consciousness like terrestrial animals do. They've evolved fascinating adaptations that allow them to sleep while still maintaining enough awareness to breathe. Many dolphins and whales practice unihemispheric sleep, where one half of the brain sleeps while the other half remains awake. The sleeping hemisphere shows typical sleep patterns in its brain waves, while the awake hemisphere maintains enough consciousness to control breathing and watch for predators. After a period of time, the hemispheres switch, allowing both sides to rest while ensuring the animal never fully loses consciousness. While sleeping this way, dolphins and whales typically swim slowly, often at the surface, occasionally taking breaths with seemingly no effort or awareness. They're not unconscious, but they're not fully awake either. They exist in a state between getting the rest they need while remaining sufficiently alert to survive. Fish have various sleep strategies. Some settle to the bottom at night, becoming less responsive to their environment while still maintaining some awareness. Parrotfish create mucus cocoons around themselves at night, structures that may help mask their scent from predators while they rest. Certain species of sharks must keep swimming to breathe, passing water over their gills, so they enter a state of reduced activity but never fully stop moving. Sea otters sleep floating on their backs at the surface, often in kelp forests where they wrap themselves in kelp fronds to avoid drifting away with currents. Sometimes they hold hands with nearby otters while sleeping, creating rafts of interconnected, sleeping animals, all floating together, gently rising and falling with the swells. The concept of sleep in the ocean challenges our land-based assumptions. Rest doesn't always mean stillness. Consciousness doesn't have to be all or nothing. These animals have found ways to rest that work within their constraints, proof that evolution finds solutions to every challenge, that life adapts to every circumstance. Part 5. The ocean's ancient history and timeless presence. The birth of the oceans. To understand the ocean's peace, we must understand its age. The ocean is not merely old, it's ancient beyond normal human comprehension, its origins stretching back to the earliest history of our planet. Earth formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago from the collision and accretion of material in the solar system's protoplanetary disk. At first, the planet was molten, a ball of liquid rock and metal, far too hot for liquid water to exist on its surface. But as the Earth cooled over millions of years, water vapor in the atmosphere began to condense. The water itself came from multiple sources. Some was delivered by comets and asteroids impacting the young Earth. These icy bodies from the outer solar system carried water that they released upon impact. But much of Earth's water was probably already present in the rocks and minerals that formed the planet, locked in chemical bonds, then released through volcanic activity as the planet's interior heated and melted. Roughly 4 billion years ago, the surface had cooled enough for water to remain liquid. Rain began to fall. Not occasional showers, but torrential rains that may have continued for millions of years. Water accumulated in low-lying areas, forming the first seas, which gradually merged into larger bodies as water continued to accumulate. These early oceans were very different from today's. They were likely acidic, filled with dissolved iron that gave them a greenish color, and they contained no oxygen. The atmosphere itself had no oxygen, so the ocean and air existed in a state utterly alien to anything we know today. Yet these were the conditions in which life began. The exact origin of life is still debated, but many scientists believe it emerged in the ocean, possibly near hydrothermal vents where hot, mineral-rich water poured out from the seafloor. These vents provided energy and chemicals that could be assembled into increasingly complex molecules, eventually crossing the threshold from complex chemistry to simple biology. For billions of years, life existed only in the ocean. The land was barren rock, lifeless and harsh. But in the sea, life diversified, evolved, became increasingly complex. Single-celled organisms gave rise to multicellular forms. Simple metabolisms became sophisticated biochemical networks. Eventually, photosynthesizing organisms appeared, primarily cyanobacteria, which began using sunlight to split water molecules and release oxygen as a waste product. This oxygen gradually accumulated in the ocean and atmosphere, fundamentally transforming Earth's chemistry and climate. It was toxic to many of the early life forms, but it opened up new possibilities for those that could tolerate it or even use it. The stage was set for the explosion of diversity that would eventually fill the ocean with the forms we recognize today. Ancient seas and prehistoric calm. Throughout Earth's history, the ocean has been a constant presence, but not an unchanging one. The shape of ocean basins has transformed as continents drifted, collided, and split apart. Sea levels have risen and fallen dramatically as ice ages locked water in glaciers or warm periods melted ice and expanded the ocean. During the Cretaceous period, roughly 100 million years ago, sea levels were much higher than today. Much of what is now dry land was covered by shallow seas. These inland seas were warm and filled with life. Ammonites spiral through the water. Marine reptiles like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs hunt fish, and countless invertebrates filter the nutrient-rich waters. The climate during the Cretaceous was generally warm, with no ice caps at the poles. Ocean currents distributed heat more evenly around the planet than they do today. The ocean was, in many ways, a gentler place with fewer temperature extremes and more stable conditions. Life thrived in these warm waters, diversifying into forms that would seem alien today. But even the catastrophic asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous period and caused the extinction of the dinosaurs could not destroy the ocean itself. The impact triggered tsunamis that raced across ocean basins, stirred up sediments, and killed countless marine organisms. Yet the ocean persisted. Life recovered. Within thousands or tens of thousands of years, the ocean's ecosystems had begun to rebuild. New species evolved to fill niches left vacant by the extinction. This resilience is one of the ocean's most remarkable qualities. Throughout Earth's history, there have been multiple mass extinctions, periods when the majority of species died out. Yet the ocean has always recovered. Life has always returned, adapted, evolved, filled the waters again with diversity and abundance. The ocean's capacity to absorb catastrophe and eventually restore itself speaks to its fundamental stability, its deep reservoirs of life and possibility. During ice ages, sea levels dropped dramatically as water was locked up in massive ice sheets covering much of North America, Europe, and Asia. At the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, sea levels were approximately 120 meters lower than today. The coastlines looked completely different, with land bridges connecting continents that are now separated by water. Yet even with so much water removed and locked in ice, the ocean remained. It was smaller, its deep waters slightly saltier due to the removed fresh water, but it was still the ocean, still following the same fundamental patterns of currents and tides, still harboring life in its depths. As the ice age ended and the glaciers melted, the ocean rose again, flooding coastal areas, creating new shallow seas, reshaping coastlines. This has happened dozens of times throughout Earth's history, a rhythm of advance and retreat governed by variations in Earth's orbit and tilt that affect how much sunlight the planet receives. Geological time and the ocean's patience. One of the most calming aspects of the ocean is its relationship to time. Ocean processes often unfold on scales that dwarf human lifetimes, that exceed human history, that challenge our ability to even conceptualize duration. Consider the formation of seamounts, underwater mountains that rise from the ocean floor. These form over millions of years as volcanic activity pushes rock upward. In some cases, particularly in the Pacific Ocean, these seamounts form as the oceanic plate moves over a stationary hotspot in the mantle. The hotspot creates a volcano, which builds up until it breaks the surface as an island. Then, as the plate continues to move, the island is carried away from the hotspot and volcanic activity ceases. A new volcano begins forming in the island's wake. Over millions of years, this creates a chain of islands and seamounts, each one progressively older as you move away from the hotspot. The Hawaiian Islands are the classic example of this process. The Big Island of Hawaii is currently over the hotspot and is volcanically active. Moving northwest along the chain, each island is progressively older and more eroded. Eventually, the islands sink below sea level as the oceanic crust cools and contracts, becoming seamounts rather than islands. This entire process, from the formation of a volcano to its eventual submergence, can take tens of millions of years. From the ocean's perspective, this is just one breath in an endless series, one small event in a history that stretches back billions of years and will continue for billions more. The mid-ocean ridges, underwater mountain ranges where new ocean floor is constantly being created, operate on similar scales. Here, tectonic plates pull apart, and magma from the mantle rises to fill the gap, solidifying into new oceanic crust. This crust then spreads away from the ridge at rates typically measured in centimeters per year. That new ocean floor, once created, will eventually travel thousands of kilometers across the ocean basin until it reaches a subduction zone, where it dives back down into the mantle, completing the cycle. This journey might take 200 million years. The oldest ocean floor we know of is around 280 million years old, ancient by human standards but young compared to continental rocks that can be 4 billion years old. The ocean floor is thus constantly renewing itself, but so slowly that the process is invisible to direct observation. If you could watch the same spot on the mid-ocean ridge for your entire life, you would see no change, no movement. Yet the process is always occurring, new rock always forming, the ocean floor always spreading, driven by the slow convection of the mantle beneath. Even erosion operates on geological timescales in the ocean. A coastal cliff might lose meters to wave action over decades or centuries, but from the ocean's perspective, this is rapid change. In the deep sea, far from terrestrial sediment sources, sediment accumulates at rates measured in millimeters per 1,000 years. A layer of sediment 1 meter thick might represent 1 million years of deposition. These timescales are so vast that they become abstract to the human mind. We can say million years, but can't truly grasp what that means. Yet the ocean operates on these scales as if they were nothing, as if 1 million years were a brief moment. This perspective is humbling and, in its own way, peaceful. Our individual worries and stresses, measured in days or months or years, are invisible from the ocean's vantage point, less than the blink of an eye in the long, slow story of water and rock and life. How the ocean shaped life itself. Life not only emerged in the ocean but was fundamentally shaped by it. The ocean's properties, its density, its chemistry, its temperature stability, determined what kinds of life could exist and how they would function. Consider buoyancy. In water, organisms are partially supported by the water itself, reducing the need for strong structural support. This allowed life to grow larger than would be possible on land without enormous skeletons. The largest organisms ever to exist, blue whales, can only exist in water, where their mass is partially supported by buoyancy. On land, such an animal would collapse under its own weight. The ocean's temperature stability, compared to air, meant that early organisms didn't need to develop sophisticated temperature regulation. The water around them stayed within a relatively narrow temperature range, allowing them to function with simple biochemistry that would fail if temperatures fluctuated wildly. This is why many marine organisms are cold-blooded, their body temperature matching their environment. There's no need for the complex, energy-intensive systems that warm-blooded animals use to maintain constant body temperature. The ocean's chemistry, rich in dissolved minerals and salts, provided the raw materials that organisms incorporated into their bodies. The concentration of salts in the ocean is remarkably similar to the concentration of salts in the bodily fluids of many marine organisms. This is likely not coincidental. Early life evolved with the ocean's chemistry as a given, building cellular systems that worked with that chemistry rather than against it. When life eventually moved onto land, it carried the ocean with it in a very literal sense. The fluid inside cells, the blood in animal circulatory systems, the sap in plants, all of these retain a chemical signature of the ocean where life began. We are, in a real sense, the ocean made flesh, carrying inside us a tiny volume of seawater modified for life in air. The ocean also drove evolution in specific directions through the selective pressures it imposed. The need to swim efficiently led to streamlined body shapes appearing independently in fish, marine reptiles, and marine mammals. The need to sense in water led to sophisticated chemical detection systems, since smell and taste are much more important in water than vision, which is limited by light penetration. The need to communicate underwater led to sounds instead of visual signals for many species. Every adaptation we see in marine life is a response to the ocean's particular conditions, evidence of the ongoing conversation between organism and environment that we call evolution. And because the ocean's conditions have remained relatively stable for long periods, successful adaptations could persist for millions of years. Some marine organisms, like horseshoe crabs and nautiluses, have changed relatively little over hundreds of millions of years, their designs already so well suited to their environment that evolution found little to improve. Part 6: Coral Reefs, Underwater Gardens of Tranquility. The slow growth of coral. Coral reefs are among the most beautiful and diverse ecosystems on Earth. Yet they're built by creatures that barely move and grow with extraordinary slowness. A coral reef is not a single organism but a colony, sometimes containing millions of individual polyps, each one a tiny animal related to sea anemones and jellyfish. Each coral polyp is simple in structure. It has a mouth surrounded by tentacles, which it uses to capture plankton from the water. But the polyp also hosts within its tissues countless microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. These algae photosynthesize using sunlight to produce sugars, and they share much of this energy with the coral polyp. In return, the polyp provides the algae with a protected place to live and access to nutrients. This symbiotic relationship is what allows coral reefs to thrive in nutrient-poor tropical waters. The algae essentially farm sunlight, producing food where there otherwise would be little. The polyp secretes calcium carbonate, building a hard skeleton around itself. Over time, as the polyp grows and divides, this skeleton builds up, creating complex structures. The polyps live only on the surface of the structure, but as layer upon layer accumulates over years, decades, centuries, a massive reef structure emerges. The growth rate of coral is measured in millimeters or centimeters per year. Fast-growing branching corals might grow 5 to 10 centimeters per year, while massive dome-shaped corals might grow only a few millimeters. Some of the largest coral structures, massive dome corals several meters across, can be hundreds or even thousands of years old. Every layer represents years of patient growth, each polyp contributing its tiny skeleton to the vast communal structure. This slowness is itself calming to contemplate. In a world obsessed with speed and instant results, the coral grows at its own pace, unrushed, adding tiny increments of calcium carbonate day after day, year after year. The reef doesn't hurry toward completion because it's never complete. It's always growing, always changing, always building on what came before. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, yet they support approximately 25% of all marine species at some point in their life cycle. They're biodiversity hotspots, underwater cities teeming with life, yet built on the slowest of foundations. Reef ecosystems and their balanced beauty. A healthy coral reef is a study in balance and interconnection. Every species present plays a role in maintaining the ecosystem, and the removal of any one species can have cascading effects throughout the system. Consider parrotfish, brightly colored fish with beak-like mouths. They graze on algae growing on coral and dead reef structure, using their powerful jaws to scrape off algae along with bits of coral skeleton. They digest the algae and excrete the ground-up coral as fine sand, which eventually settles and becomes part of the beach. A single large parrotfish can produce hundreds of kilograms of sand per year. The distinctive white sand beaches of tropical islands are largely parrotfish waste, the ground-up remains of coral structure that has passed through fish digestive systems. By controlling algae, parrotfish prevent it from overgrowing and smothering living coral. If parrotfish are removed by overfishing, algae can proliferate, competing with coral for space and light, eventually degrading the reef. The parrotfish's constant grazing maintains a balance between coral and algae, ensuring both can coexist. Sea urchins play a similar role, grazing on algae and keeping surfaces clear. But if sea urchin populations get too large, they can overgraze, damaging coral. Predators like triggerfish keep urchin populations in check. But if those predators are removed, urchins can multiply unchecked. Every population is regulated by others, creating a web of interactions that maintains equilibrium. Crown-of-thorns starfish feed on coral polyps. In normal numbers, they're part of the reef ecosystem with little overall impact. But occasionally, population explosions occur, and hordes of these starfish can devastate large areas of reef, consuming the living coral and leaving behind white skeletons. Eventually, predators and disease bring the starfish population back down, and the coral begins to recover, slowly rebuilding over decades. This cycle of disturbance and recovery is natural, part of the reef's rhythm. Reefs have survived similar events for millions of years. What they struggle with is sustained, ongoing pressure that prevents recovery, pollution, warming water, ocean acidification, destructive fishing practices. These are stresses beyond what the reef evolved to handle. But when conditions are right, the reef is remarkably resilient. After bleaching events, where coral expels its algal symbionts in response to stress, turning bone white, the coral can recover if conditions improve quickly enough. New algae recolonize, and the coral regains its color and continues growing. Young corals settle on dead reef structure, beginning the slow process of building anew. Colors, patterns, and peaceful complexity. One of the most striking features of a coral reef is its color. Unlike the blue and green monotone of the open ocean, reefs explode with color, corals in shades of brown, green, pink, purple, and yellow. Fish in almost every imaginable pattern and hue. Anemones, sponges, and other invertebrates adding splashes of red, orange, and blue. These colors serve various purposes. Some are warning colors, indicating toxicity or defense mechanisms. Others are camouflage, allowing animals to blend into the complex reef environment. Still others are sexual signals, allowing individuals to identify suitable mates of their own species among the thousands of species present on the reef. But setting aside the evolutionary purposes, we can simply appreciate the colors aesthetically. There's something inherently pleasing about the diversity, the way colors and forms combine and contrast. A reef is like a living art installation, constantly shifting as fish move and coral polyps extend and retract their tentacles, yet fundamentally stable in its overall structure and composition. The patterns on reef fish often seem designed for beauty rather than function. A queen angelfish has sweeping blue and yellow bands that create graceful curves across its body. A Moorish idol has stark black, white, and yellow vertical bands and an extended dorsal fin that trails behind it like a banner. A mandarin fish is covered in psychedelic swirls of blue, orange, and green. Yet each of these patterns presumably serves some purpose: identification, disruption of body outline for camouflage, or warning of toxicity. The structural complexity of the reef itself adds another layer. Coral grows in countless forms: branching structures that look like trees, massive dome-shaped colonies, delicate plates extending from the reef face, antler-like staghorn formations. These structures create a three-dimensional maze of hiding places, hunting grounds, and territories. Fish dart in and out of crevices, shrimp shelter under overhangs, eels hide in holes during the day and emerge to hunt at night. This complexity means that a small area of reef can support an enormous number of organisms. In a space the size of a small room, there might be hundreds of species present, from microscopic organisms living in the coral tissue to large fish cruising above the reef. Every surface is colonized, every space utilized. Yet the overall impression is not of crowding but of abundance, of life finding ways to flourish in every available niche. Night on the reef. As daylight fades and darkness settles over the reef, a transformation occurs. The day shift retires and the night shift emerges. Diurnal fish, those active during the day, seek shelter in the reef structure, tucking themselves into crevices or wedging under coral formations. Many change color at night, taking on dull, mottled patterns that help them blend into shadows. In their place come the nocturnal species. Eels emerge from their hiding places, swimming with sinuous grace as they hunt for sleeping fish. Octopuses venture out, their soft bodies allowing them to squeeze through impossibly small gaps in the reef. Basket stars unfurl their branching arms, forming intricate nets to capture plankton drifting in the current. The reef at night is quieter in some ways. The snapping and crunching sounds of daytime feeding diminish. But it's not silent. There are still the clicking sounds of snapping shrimp, occasional scraping sounds as feeding continues, the gentle swoosh of water moving through and around the reef structure. Bioluminescence becomes visible at night on the reef, though it's typically subtle. Some organisms flash briefly when disturbed. Others glow continuously with low light. The overall effect is of gentle constellations scattered through the reef, marking the presence of life in the darkness. There's a peaceful quality to the night reef. With reduced visibility, there's less frantic activity. Predators hunt by scent and vibration as much as sight. Prey depend on camouflage and stillness rather than rapid escape. The pace of life slows, though it never stops entirely. By dawn, the transition reverses. Night creatures return to their daytime hiding spots. Day-active fish emerge, beginning their morning routines of feeding and territorial display. The reef never sleeps, not really. There's always some life active, always something happening. But the character changes with the light, creating daily rhythms that have repeated for as long as the reef has existed. The ocean's role in Earth's climate and balance. The ocean is not simply a backdrop to our planet's story, but rather the primary character in maintaining the delicate equilibrium that makes life possible. When we think about climate regulation, our minds might drift to forests or the atmosphere, but it's the vast blue expanses covering more than 70% of Earth's surface that truly hold the reins of our planet's temperature and weather patterns. Picture, if you will, the ocean as an enormous battery, constantly charging and discharging energy. Since the 1970s, the ocean has absorbed more than 90% of the excess heat trapped by greenhouse gases. This is not a small feat. We're talking about an astronomical amount of thermal energy that, without the ocean's buffering capacity, would have sent atmospheric temperatures soaring to levels that would have fundamentally altered life as we know it. The ocean stores approximately 91% of the excess heat energy in Earth's climate system, acting as a massive thermal reservoir that moderates the pace of climate change. The way water absorbs heat is remarkable in itself. Water has what scientists call a high specific heat capacity, which means it can absorb tremendous amounts of thermal energy without experiencing dramatic temperature increases. Think of it this way. While a rock left in the sun quickly becomes too hot to touch, the ocean can absorb hours of intense sunlight with only modest warming. This property isn't just a curious scientific fact. It's the reason coastal regions experience milder climates compared to inland areas, why summer afternoons by the sea feel cooler than they do in the desert, and why winter nights near the ocean don't plunge to the same frigid depths as those far from water. Between 1993 and 2024, the global ocean has been gaining heat at a rate of approximately 0.66 to 0.74 watts per square meter when averaged across Earth's entire surface. This might sound like a small number, but when you multiply it by the vast surface area of our planet, you're looking at an incomprehensible amount of energy being absorbed and stored. To put this in perspective, this rate of energy accumulation is equivalent to detonating several 100,000 atomic bombs worth of energy every single day. All of that thermal energy being tucked away into the ocean's embrace rather than heating the atmosphere directly. The distribution of this heat absorption isn't uniform across the ocean. The upper layers, particularly the top 700 meters, have been warming fastest, but heat is gradually making its way deeper. Recent observations show that mode waters and intermediate waters, found at depths between the surface and 2,000 meters, account for roughly 89% of total ocean heat uptake during the modern era. These intermediate layers act like a slow-motion conveyor belt, taking heat from the surface and transporting it to greater depths, where it can remain sequestered for centuries or even millennia. But the ocean's role as Earth's thermostat extends far beyond simple heat absorption. The ocean actively redistributes thermal energy around the planet through its vast system of currents. Warm water from the tropics flows toward the poles, while cold water from polar regions makes the return journey toward the equator. This grand circulation, sometimes called the global conveyor belt or thermohaline circulation, is driven by differences in water temperature and salinity. As water warms in tropical regions, it becomes less dense and rises, while cold water in polar regions becomes denser and sinks, creating a continuous cycle that can take a single water molecule up to 1,000 years to complete. One of the most famous components of this system is the Gulf Stream, a powerful current that carries warm water from the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico up along the eastern coast of North America before sweeping across the Atlantic toward Europe. Without the Gulf Stream, Western Europe would be as cold as regions at similar latitudes in Canada. London is at roughly the same latitude as Calgary, yet their winter climates are dramatically different. This is the ocean doing its climate work, transporting approximately 1.4 petawatts of thermal power northward, equivalent to the output of millions of power plants running continuously. The ocean's influence on climate extends through another crucial mechanism, the water cycle. The ocean holds 97% of all water on Earth, making it the primary source of moisture that enters the atmosphere. Each day, the sun's energy causes an estimated 1,000 cubic kilometers of water to evaporate from the ocean surface. This evaporation is concentrated in subtropical regions where dry air and persistent trade winds enhance the process. As water transitions from liquid to vapor, it absorbs latent heat from the ocean surface, providing a cooling effect that helps regulate sea surface temperatures. This water vapor, now airborne, becomes the raw material for virtually all precipitation on Earth. Approximately 78% of global rainfall occurs over the ocean, while 86% of all evaporation originates from the seas. The moisture evaporated from mid-latitude oceans is transported by atmospheric circulation toward both the equator and the poles. At the equator, this moisture feeds the intense rainfall of the intertropical convergence zone, where warm, moist air rises and releases its water burden. At higher latitudes, the same moisture contributes to the storms and weather patterns that water our continents. When water vapor condenses back into liquid droplets to form clouds and precipitation, it releases the latent heat it absorbed during evaporation. This heat release drives much of the atmospheric circulation in the tropics and plays a fundamental role in powering the world's weather systems. Hurricane formation, for instance, depends critically on warm ocean water providing both heat and moisture to fuel these massive storms. As the ocean warms, it's capable of supplying more energy to tropical cyclones, contributing to their increasing intensity. The ocean's role in the water cycle also acts as a bridge between the marine and terrestrial environments. Water evaporated from the ocean travels inland, falls as precipitation over continents, flows through rivers and streams, and eventually returns to the sea, completing a cycle that sustains all terrestrial ecosystems. Without this oceanic source of moisture, continental interiors would be barren deserts, unable to support the forests, grasslands, and agricultural systems that civilization depends upon. But perhaps one of the ocean's most critical climate functions is its ability to absorb and store carbon dioxide. The ocean acts as Earth's largest carbon sink, having absorbed roughly 30 to 40% of all carbon dioxide released by human activities since the Industrial Revolution. This absorption occurs through two primary mechanisms: the physical pump and the biological pump, working together to remove carbon from the surface and transport it to the deep ocean where it can remain isolated from the atmosphere for centuries or millennia. The physical pump, also called the solubility pump, relies on basic chemistry. Carbon dioxide dissolves more readily in cold water than in warm water, and it dissolves more readily at higher pressures found in the deep ocean. In polar regions, cold surface waters absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. As these waters cool and become denser, they sink, carrying their dissolved carbon cargo to the ocean depths. This sinking water becomes part of the thermohaline circulation, transporting carbon away from contact with the atmosphere. Over hundreds or thousands of years, this deep water eventually resurfaces in other parts of the ocean, but for the duration of its journey through the depths, the carbon it carries remains effectively removed from the climate system. The biological pump operates through the activities of marine life, particularly microscopic phytoplankton. These tiny organisms, invisible to the naked eye but collectively responsible for producing approximately 50% of Earth's oxygen, absorb carbon dioxide through photosynthesis just like terrestrial plants. When phytoplankton die, their bodies sink through the water column as what scientists poetically call marine snow. This descent is a journey through different ocean layers, each with its own temperature, pressure, and ecosystem. Some of this organic matter is consumed by organisms at various depths, returning the carbon to the water as it's respired. But a portion of the marine snow reaches the deep seafloor, where cold temperatures, high pressure, and low oxygen levels slow decomposition processes dramatically. Recent research has revealed fascinating details about this process. The marine snow doesn't simply fall through the water like snow through air. These particles have what researchers describe as mucus tails, sticky threads that trail behind them as they sink. These tails cause the particles to interact with plankton and other organisms in ways that can either speed their descent or slow it down. When marine snow encounters certain types of plankton, particularly those that feed by filtering water, it can be repackaged into denser fecal pellets that sink faster. This interaction between falling organic matter and the living organisms in the water column helps determine how much carbon actually reaches the deep ocean for long-term storage. The ocean sequesters between 5 and 10 gigatons of carbon annually through these processes. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the carbon emissions from several billion cars driving for a year. If the marine snow particles can sink deep enough in the ocean, typically below a depth of 1,000 meters, the carbon they contain can remain isolated from the atmosphere for tens of thousands of years. This deep ocean carbon storage is one of the planet's most important climate regulation mechanisms. Coastal ecosystems also play an outsized role in carbon sequestration. Salt marshes, mangroves, and seagrass beds, collectively known as blue carbon ecosystems, are remarkably efficient at capturing and storing carbon. These habitats store carbon both in their living plant tissue and in the sediments beneath them. The oxygen-poor conditions in coastal wetland sediments prevent the rapid breakdown of organic matter, allowing carbon to accumulate over hundreds or thousands of years. Remarkably, these coastal ecosystems can store 10 times more carbon per unit area than terrestrial forests, despite covering a much smaller area of the planet. A mangrove forest, with its characteristic prop roots rising from the waterlogged soil, doesn't just provide nursery habitat for fish and protect coastlines from storm surges. It's actively pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it away in sediments that may remain undisturbed for millennia. The same is true for seagrass meadows gently swaying in shallow coastal waters. Each blade of seagrass is photosynthesizing, converting carbon dioxide into plant matter while releasing oxygen. When that plant matter becomes buried in sediment, the carbon it contains is effectively removed from the carbon cycle. However, the ocean's capacity to continue these climate-regulating functions is not infinite, and concerning changes are already underway. As the ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide, the chemical balance of seawater is shifting. When carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid, lowering the water's pH in a process known as ocean acidification. Since the Industrial Revolution, the average pH of ocean surface waters has dropped by approximately 0.1 units, representing a 30% increase in acidity. This may sound modest, but it's occurring at a rate faster than anything observed in the geological record for millions of years. Ocean acidification has profound implications for marine life, particularly for organisms that build shells or skeletons from calcium carbonate, including corals, mollusks, and many types of plankton. As seawater becomes more acidic, it becomes more difficult for these organisms to construct and maintain their calcium carbonate structures. Coral reefs, sometimes called the rainforests of the sea for their incredible biodiversity, are particularly vulnerable. When combined with warming waters that cause coral bleaching, acidification creates a double threat that has already caused widespread coral mortality in many parts of the world. The warming of the ocean itself brings additional complications. Warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen than cold water, and as the ocean heats up, oxygen levels are declining in a process called deoxygenation. This creates expanding dead zones, where oxygen levels are too low to support most marine life. The warming also affects the ocean stratification, the layering of water masses based on temperature and salinity. As surface waters warm, the difference between warm surface layers and cold deep layers becomes more pronounced, reducing mixing between these layers. This enhanced stratification can limit the upward transport of nutrients from the deep ocean to surface waters, potentially affecting the productivity of marine ecosystems and the biological pump's efficiency. There's also evidence that the ocean's ability to absorb carbon dioxide may be weakening. Recent studies comparing carbon uptake between 1994 to 2004 and 2004 to 2014 found that while the ocean continued to absorb substantial amounts of carbon, the rate of increase in storage slowed slightly. If this trend continues, it means the ocean may not be able to absorb carbon at the same rate it has in the past, leaving more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and accelerating climate change. The heat already stored in the ocean represents a commitment to future warming. Even if greenhouse gas emissions stopped immediately, the ocean would continue releasing heat back to the atmosphere for centuries, causing continued warming. This thermal inertia means that many impacts of climate change are already locked in, regardless of future emission reductions. The melting of ice sheets and glaciers, the expansion of seawater as it warms, and the resulting sea level rise will continue for hundreds of years based solely on the heat already absorbed by the ocean. Yet, understanding these processes also illuminates potential solutions. Protecting and restoring coastal blue carbon ecosystems can enhance natural carbon sequestration. Reducing pollution and overfishing can maintain healthier marine ecosystems that are more resilient to climate change. Some researchers are exploring ways to enhance the ocean's natural carbon storage capacity, though such interventions remain controversial and require extensive study to ensure they don't cause unintended harm. The ocean's role as Earth's thermostat, water source, and carbon sink is a reminder of how interconnected our planet's systems truly are. Every breath we take contains oxygen produced by marine phytoplankton. The rain that falls on our cities and farmlands began as water evaporated from the ocean surface. The mild climate that makes much of our world habitable depends on the ocean absorbing heat and redistributing it around the globe. This blue expanse, so often taken for granted, is the foundation upon which all terrestrial life ultimately depends. As we drift towards sleep, we might imagine ourselves connected to this vast system, our breath synchronized with the ocean's patient work of regulating our planet's climate, one molecule of carbon, 1 joule of energy, 1 drop of water at a time. Sounds of the sea, the ocean's peaceful symphony. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're underwater, suspended in the blue, your body gently swaying with the current. What do you hear? Many people imagine the ocean as silent, a realm of profound quiet broken only by the occasional splash at the surface. But the reality is far more interesting. The ocean is filled with sound, a complex and ever-changing acoustic environment that has been described as one of nature's most intricate symphonies. Understanding these sounds, from the whispers of distant waves to the elaborate songs of whales, reveals another dimension of the ocean's character and its calming presence. Let's begin with the fundamental sounds that have filled the ocean since its formation billions of years ago. The sounds of water itself interacting with the world. When waves break at the surface, they create a characteristic rushing, hissing sound that varies with the wave's size and the wind's strength. These breaking waves trap air bubbles, and as these bubbles collapse, they generate sound across a broad range of frequencies. On a calm day, you might hear gentle lapping sounds, while during a storm, the thunderous crash of large breakers resonates through the water. This wave-generated sound forms a constant background chorus, varying in intensity but always present, like the bassline rhythm in a piece of music. Rain creates its own distinctive acoustic signature underwater. When raindrops strike the water surface, each drop creates a small splash and traps a tiny bubble of air. As these bubbles oscillate and eventually collapse, they produce a crackling, popping sound. Light rain creates a gentle patter, while heavy downpours can increase underwater noise levels by up to 35 decibels across frequencies ranging from several hundred hertz to more than 20,000 hertz. The sound of rain underwater is surprisingly musical, a percussion section made up of millions of tiny drummers, each adding their contribution to the overall soundscape. Scientists have learned to identify different types of precipitation, distinguishing between drizzle, moderate rain, and heavy downpours just by listening to their underwater acoustic signatures. In polar regions, ice adds another layer to the ocean's acoustic tapestry. Ice cracking, grinding, and melting produces sounds that range from sharp, pistol-like cracks to long, haunting moans and groans. When ice floes collide, driven by wind and current, they create a cacophony that can be heard for kilometers. When glaciers calve, massive chunks of ice breaking off and plunging into the sea, they generate underwater sounds so loud they can be detected by hydrophones on the other side of an ocean basin. These ice sounds have their own seasonal rhythm, increasing during spring and summer melting, then diminishing during winter freeze-up. For scientists studying climate change, these acoustic signals provide real-time information about the state of polar ice, allowing them to monitor melting and ice sheet dynamics from afar. The solid earth beneath the ocean also contributes to the soundscape. Underwater earthquakes generate low-frequency sounds that can propagate across entire ocean basins. When tectonic plates shift or collide, they release energy that travels through both the seafloor and the water column. Underwater volcanoes erupt with explosive force, their detonations producing some of the loudest natural sounds in the ocean. Hydrothermal vents, where superheated water laden with minerals shoots up from the seafloor, create their own distinctive sounds as hot fluid mixes turbulently with cold seawater. These geological sounds provide a reminder that the ocean rests upon a dynamically active planet, one that is constantly reshaping itself. But perhaps the most captivating sounds in the ocean come from its living inhabitants. Marine animals have evolved sophisticated acoustic abilities, using sound for communication, navigation, hunting, and understanding their environment. The diversity of biological sounds in the ocean is staggering, ranging from frequencies below 10 Hz, far below the range of human hearing, to ultrasonic frequencies above 100,000 Hz, far above what we can perceive. Let's start with the giants, the baleen whales, which include blue whales, humpback whales, fin whales, and several other species. These whales produce some of the loudest biological sounds on Earth. Blue whales, the largest animals ever to exist, generate low-frequency calls that can reach 188 decibels underwater, as loud as a jet engine in air. These calls, typically between 10 and 40 hertz in frequency, travel enormous distances through the ocean. Under favorable conditions, a blue whale's call can be detected more than 1,000 kilometers away. This is possible because sound travels exceptionally well underwater, moving at approximately 1,500 meters per second in seawater, nearly 5 times faster than in air. The low-frequency sounds produced by baleen whales are thought to serve multiple purposes. During breeding season, males produce elaborate songs that may attract females or warn other males to stay away. These songs can last from a few minutes to over half an hour, and the singing whale may repeat the same song over and over for hours or even days. What's particularly fascinating is that all the male humpback whales in a particular region sing essentially the same song at any given time, but this song gradually evolves over months and years. Units that started as rising sweeps in frequency might flatten out over time. New themes emerge while old ones fade away. It's a form of cultural transmission where whales learn the current song from other members of their population. The complexity of humpback whale songs has captivated researchers for decades. The songs have a hierarchical structure, with individual units combining into subphrases, subphrases combining into phrases, phrases forming themes, and multiple themes creating a complete song. This nested organization, this Russian doll-like arrangement, gives whale songs a syntactic structure that some scientists suggest resembles the complexity of human language more than the relatively simple, linear structure of bird songs. While we cannot yet claim that whales have language in the human sense, the sophistication of their vocalizations suggests cognitive abilities and social complexity that we are only beginning to understand. Other baleen whales have their own vocal repertoires. Fin whales produce incredibly low-frequency pulses, some as low as 20 hertz, that pulse in regular patterns, sometimes described as biosonar because of their rhythmic, sonar-like quality. Bowhead whales, living in the Arctic, sing complex songs that include jazz-like improvisations, rarely repeating the same phrase exactly. These Arctic singers keep up their vocalizations even through the long polar night, suggesting that song plays an important role in maintaining social connections in an environment where vision is limited. Toothed whales and dolphins, collectively known as odontocetes, have evolved a completely different acoustic strategy. Rather than the low-frequency songs of their baleen cousins, toothed whales produce high-frequency clicks and whistles. These sounds serve multiple functions, but one of the most remarkable is echolocation, a biological sonar system that allows these animals to see with sound in environments where light is limited or absent. Echolocation works by producing a series of rapid clicks, then listening for the echoes that bounce back from objects in the environment. By analyzing these echoes, the time delay between the outgoing click and the returning echo, the frequency content of the echo, and subtle changes in the echo's characteristics, dolphins and toothed whales can build up a detailed acoustic picture of their surroundings. They can determine an object's distance, size, shape, speed, and even its internal structure. Dolphins can distinguish between different types of fish, identify whether a container is filled with water or air, and even detect objects buried beneath sand. This acoustic imaging is so precise that some researchers believe it may provide a three-dimensional picture as detailed as what we perceive with vision. The clicks used for echolocation are extraordinarily diverse. Dolphins produce clicks that sweep across a wide range of frequencies, often including ultrasonic components above 100,000 Hz. Harbor porpoises produce narrowband high-frequency clicks centered around 130,000 Hz, well above the hearing range of potential predators like killer whales. This acoustic crypsis, the ability to echolocate using sounds that predators can't hear, provides a stealth advantage. Sperm whales, the largest toothed whales, produce clicks that are the loudest sounds made by any animal, reaching over 230 decibels underwater. These clicks are so powerful that they can likely stun or disorient the squid that sperm whales hunt in the deep ocean. But toothed whales don't just click for echolocation. They also whistle, squeak, and produce a variety of other sounds for social communication. Bottlenose dolphins, perhaps the most studied of all marine mammals, produce what researchers call signature whistles. Each dolphin develops its own unique whistle contour, a pattern of frequency modulation that functions essentially as a name. Dolphins use these signature whistles to identify themselves to others, to call to specific individuals, and to maintain contact with their group members. When a dolphin is separated from its pod, it may produce its signature whistle repeatedly, essentially calling out, "I'm here, where are you?" Other dolphins can imitate these signature whistles, a form of vocal matching that appears to strengthen social bonds between individuals with close relationships. Killer whales take this vocal learning to another level. Different killer whale pods, family groups that stay together for life, have distinct dialects, sets of calls that are unique to their group. These dialects are so distinctive that researchers can identify which pod is present just by listening to their calls. The calls are learned, passed down from mother to calf, creating cultural traditions that can persist for generations. Some killer whale populations that live in overlapping areas maintain completely different dialects, suggesting that these acoustic differences may help reinforce social identity and group cohesion. The acoustic communication of dolphins and whales isn't limited to intentional vocalizations. Body movements also generate sound. When a whale breaches, launching its massive body out of the water and crashing back down, it creates a thunderous splash that carries both through the air and underwater, potentially signaling other whales several kilometers away. Tail slapping. When a whale lifts its tail fluke above the surface and slams it down forcefully, creates a loud smacking sound that might serve as a threat display or attention-getting signal. Even the sound of movement through the water, the turbulence created by powerful tail strokes, might convey information to nearby animals about another's size, speed, and behavior. Fish, too, are much more vocal than most people realize. Many species produce sounds for communication, typically during spawning season or territorial disputes. These sounds are usually made not by vocal cords, which fish lack, but by other mechanisms. Some fish grind their teeth together, creating grating or croaking sounds. Others vibrate their swim bladders, the gas-filled organs that help them maintain buoyancy, to produce drumming, grunting, or booming sounds. Oyster toadfish males produce a foghorn-like call during breeding season, creating a chorus in shallow coastal waters that can be surprisingly loud. Midshipman fish, named for rows of light-producing organs on their undersides that resemble a naval officer's buttons, produce humming sounds by rapidly contracting muscles around their swim bladders. During summer spawning season, The accumulated humming of male midshipman fish has kept houseboat residents in some harbors awake at night, the biological equivalent of a very large, very persistent bee. Coral reefs have their own distinctive soundscapes, often described as crackling or sizzling. Much of this sound comes from snapping shrimp, tiny crustaceans that produce surprisingly loud sounds by rapidly closing a specialized claw. This generates a cavitation bubble, a small region of extremely low pressure where water vaporizes momentarily before collapsing violently. The bubble's collapse creates a sharp crack or snap that can reach 190 decibels, loud enough to stun small fish that the shrimp then drag into its burrow to eat. In aggregate, the countless snapping shrimp on a coral reef create a background noise level that sounds like bacon frying or fat sizzling, a constant crackle that characterizes healthy reef environments. The intensity of this crackling is so distinctive that marine biologists use it as an indicator of reef health. A healthy, biodiverse reef is a noisy reef, while degraded reefs fall relatively silent. Even invertebrates that seem silent contribute to the soundscape. Sea urchins make scraping sounds as they graze on algae and coral. Crabs produce clicking and tapping sounds by moving their claws or other appendages. In some cases, even planktonic organisms, tiny animals drifting with the currents, create sound through their movements, though these sounds are at the limit of what our instruments can detect. The cumulative effect of all these biological sounds creates what scientists call a biophony, the portion of the soundscape generated by living organisms. On a healthy coral reef during dawn or dusk, when many species are most active, the biophony is rich and complex, a layered chorus where different species and individuals add their voices at different frequencies and times, creating an acoustic environment as intricate as any rainforest at daybreak. Listening to these underwater sounds can be profoundly calming. There's something meditative about the rhythmic clicking of dolphin echolocation, the distant, haunting song of a humpback whale, or the gentle crackle of a thriving coral reef. These sounds connect us to a world that has existed for millions of years, where communication and survival happen through acoustic channels we can only partially understand. They remind us that the ocean is not empty or silent, but filled with life, with activity, with meaning. Yet there's another side to the ocean soundscape that deserves mention, though it brings less tranquility. The sounds of the deep sea, particularly in the abyssal plains far from any coast and far below the reach of surface storms, approach something like true silence. At depths of several thousand meters, away from the biological activity concentrated in shallower waters, the ambient noise levels drop dramatically. The deep sea is one of the quietest places on Earth, a realm where sound fades to barely measurable levels. In these depths, bioluminescence replaces sound as the primary means of communication, with creatures creating their own light in the perpetual darkness. This deep-sea quiet is part of what makes the ocean such a powerful metaphor for peace and contemplation. To imagine oneself descending through the water column, leaving behind the bustle of the surface, passing through layers of decreasing light and activity, eventually reaching a place where even sound seems to hesitate, is to imagine a form of solitude and stillness that is increasingly rare in our modern world. Even the sounds that do exist in these depths have a quality of patience and slowness. Sound travels differently here, refracted and reflected by temperature gradients and pressure changes. At certain depths, typically around 1,000 meters, there exists a layer called the SOFAR channel, where sound waves become trapped and can travel extreme distances with very little loss of energy. A sound generated in this channel can potentially circle the globe, taking hours or days to complete its journey, a message in a bottle that speaks in frequencies rather than words. For the creatures that live in the deep sea, sound may be one of the few ways to find a mate in the vast, dark emptiness. Some deep-sea fish are thought to produce sounds, though we know relatively little about these acoustic behaviors because observing animals at such depths remains technically challenging. What we do know suggests that sound in the deep sea is used sparingly, perhaps because the cost of producing sound in such a cold, high-pressure environment is significant, or perhaps because in a world of such profound quiet, even small sounds carry far and do not need to be loud. The sounds of the sea, whether the busy chorus of a coastal reef or the near silence of the abyss, invite us to listen in ways we rarely do on land. They remind us that communication exists in forms we cannot directly access, that intelligence and social complexity can manifest in clicks and whistles rather than words, that meaning can be conveyed across vast distances through the patient propagation of low-frequency sound through cold, dark water. There's a dreamlike quality to these acoustic realms. Whale songs that take minutes to unfold, repeating with variations over hours, have a meditative structure that seems to slow time itself. The crackling of a coral reef is white noise of the highest quality, masking other sounds and creating a cocoon of steady, unchanging sensation. Even the simplest sounds, the whisper of current moving past a rock, the distant rumble of a storm at the surface, the barely audible movement of fish through water, all these contribute to a soundscape that is fundamentally different from the terrestrial world we inhabit. As we let these sounds wash over us in our imagination, we might notice our breathing slowing, our muscles relaxing, our thoughts becoming less insistent. The ocean sounds, so foreign and yet so strangely familiar, pull us out of our daily concerns and connect us to something larger, older, and more fundamental. We are hearing, even if only in our minds, the voice of a world that has persisted for billions of years, that will continue long after we are gone, that operates according to principles and rhythms that have nothing to do with human schedules or human concerns. This is part of why ocean sounds are so frequently used in meditation and sleep aids. They offer an escape from the human-dominated acoustic environment of modern life. There are no car horns in the ocean's depths, no sirens, no mechanical hums. Even the biological sounds, while diverse and sometimes loud, follow natural patterns, the product of millions of years of evolution rather than the sudden, jarring noises of industrial society. Let the sounds of the sea remind you that the world is larger than your immediate experience, that mystery and wonder still exist, that there are realms where humans are visitors at best and where life has evolved solutions to challenges we can barely imagine. In the sounds of the ocean, we find not just entertainment or curiosity, but a doorway to a different way of being. One that is patient, adaptive, and ultimately more in harmony with the rhythms of the natural world. As we come to the end of this journey through the ocean's many dimensions, let's take a moment to bring all these threads together, to appreciate the full picture of what this vast blue expanse means for our planet and for us personally. We've explored how the ocean regulates Earth's climate, absorbing heat and carbon dioxide, driving the water cycle, and maintaining the delicate balance that makes our world habitable. We've listened to the symphony of sounds beneath the waves, from the crashing of surface waves to the songs of whales and the crackling of coral reefs. We've seen how the ocean is not just a body of water, but a living, dynamic system that connects every part of our planet. The ocean is, in many ways, the ultimate expression of patience and persistence. It moves slowly, its great currents taking centuries to complete their circuits. It changes gradually, its chemistry shifting over decades in response to atmospheric conditions. It remembers, storing heat and carbon for generations, its deep waters carrying the signature of conditions from hundreds or thousands of years ago. This quality of patient persistence is part of what makes the ocean such a powerful metaphor for the kind of peace we seek in our own lives. The ability to remain steady in the face of change, to absorb stress without breaking, to maintain balance even as conditions shift. But the ocean also teaches us about interconnection. The breath you took as you started reading this video came partly from oxygen produced by marine phytoplankton. The water you drank today began as evaporation from the ocean surface. The moderate climate of your region depends on ocean currents distributing heat around the planet. Your life is, in countless invisible ways, connected to and dependent upon the health and stability of the ocean. Recognizing this connection can foster a sense of responsibility, certainly, but also a sense of wonder and gratitude. There's something deeply humbling about contemplating the ocean. It existed long before humans appeared, and it will persist long after we're gone. It operates on scales of space and time that dwarf human experience. A single ocean current carries more water than all the world's rivers combined. A whale's song can travel farther in a day than most humans travel in a week. The deep sea contains ecosystems that have remained essentially unchanged for millions of years, existing in perpetual darkness and cold, yet teeming with life adapted to conditions we can barely simulate in our most sophisticated laboratories. This humility, this recognition of our place within a larger system, is increasingly rare in modern life. We're surrounded by human creations, by technology and infrastructure that seems to bend the natural world to our will. But the ocean reminds us of the limits of that control. We cannot stop hurricanes from forming. We cannot eliminate the tides. We cannot prevent the ocean from rising as it warms. What we can do is understand, appreciate, and work in harmony with these systems rather than against them. As you prepare for sleep, or simply for a moment of rest and reflection, consider carrying the ocean with you. Not as a distant place you might someday visit, but as a presence that is always there, always connected to you, always performing its essential work of maintaining the conditions for life. When you feel stressed or overwhelmed, you might imagine yourself floating in calm water, supported effortlessly, connected to the largest ecosystem on Earth. When you need patience, remember the ocean's currents flowing steadily for centuries. When you need resilience, think of coral reefs that have weathered countless storms, or of whales that navigate entire ocean basins with nothing but their songs and their knowledge of the sea. The ocean has given us so much, asking little in return. But as we learn more about how human activities are affecting marine environments, it becomes clear that our relationship with the sea needs to evolve. Every decision we make, from the products we consume to the energy sources we choose to support, ripples outward, eventually touching the ocean. Reducing carbon emissions protects the ocean from further warming and acidification. Reducing plastic use prevents debris from entering marine food webs. Supporting sustainable fishing practices helps maintain the balance of ocean ecosystems. These actions, multiplied across millions of people, can make a real difference. But tonight, or in this moment, the call is not to action in the conventional sense, but to awareness, to appreciation, to allowing ourselves to feel connected to something vast and ancient and essential. The ocean doesn't need us to save it as much as it needs us to understand our place within it, to recognize that its health and ours are inseparable, that the same carbon atoms that once circulated through the bodies of trilobites hundreds of millions of years ago now circulate through our bodies, having spent the intervening eons cycling through ocean water, marine organisms, seafloor sediments, and back again. This perspective, this sense of being part of a system that operates on timescales beyond human comprehension, can be oddly comforting. Our individual worries and stresses, while very real and worthy of attention, exist within a context so much larger that they can feel less overwhelming. The ocean has weathered ice ages and warm periods, has seen continents collide and separate, has watched as life evolved from single-celled organisms to the incredible diversity we see today. It will continue its essential work regardless of what any individual does or doesn't do. And yet, we are part of that work. Every breath we take, every decision we make, every moment we spend in reflection or appreciation connects us to this grand system. So as we conclude this exploration, let yourself settle into that connection. Feel the pull of the tides in your own body. The same moon that moves ocean water moves the water in your cells. Hear the echo of wave sounds in your breathing, the same rhythm that has sounded on coastlines since the first seas formed. Know that you are made largely of water, that the chemistry of your blood echoes the chemistry of ancient seawater, that you are, in a very literal sense, carrying the ocean within you. Let that knowledge bring peace. Let it soften the boundaries between self and environment. Let it remind you that you are never truly alone, but always connected, always part of a living planet, always held by the same forces that have cradled life since its beginning. The ocean's patient work of regulating climate, cycling water, storing carbon, supporting life, all of this continues whether we think about it or not. But when we do turn our attention to it, when we allow ourselves to appreciate and connect with these processes, we tap into something profoundly calming and centering. If you found value in this journey through ocean science and soundscapes, if these words and ideas have brought you some measure of peace or wonder or simply interesting information to contemplate, I'd be grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to the Deep Science Sleep channel. Your support helps me continue creating content that explores the intersection of scientific knowledge and peaceful reflection, that tries to bring the natural world into our consciousness in ways that are both educational and deeply calming. Think of subscribing not just as supporting a content creator, though it is that, but as choosing to regularly invite science and nature into your life, as committing to learning about and appreciating the world around us. Each video is an opportunity to slow down, to learn something new, to connect with aspects of our planet that too often go unnoticed in the rush of daily life. The ocean we've explored tonight is just one of countless fascinating topics waiting to be discovered, each with its own capacity to inspire wonder and provide respite from the demands of modern living. The world needs more people who understand and appreciate the ocean, who carry with them an awareness of how it works and why it matters. The world needs more people who can find peace not just in entertainment or distraction, but in understanding, in connection, in the quiet contemplation of natural systems. By engaging with content like this, by choosing to spend your time learning about the ocean rather than simply scrolling past, you're making a small but meaningful choice toward that kind of awareness. And with that, Let the ocean carry you toward rest, always inviting us to participate in something larger than ourselves. Tonight, accept that invitation. Float in its embrace, rest in its patient rhythm, and know that when you wake, the ocean will still be there, still performing its essential work, still offering its lessons of patience, resilience, and connection. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. Until next time, may your sleep be as deep and peaceful as the ocean's quietest depths, and may you wake refreshed and connected to the wonder of the natural world that sustains us all. Good night.